Welcome to the Sober Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Brickhouse, and we'd like to take a minute to get the word out about one of our sister companies, Sober Life Apparel, where positivity and pride pave the way to a brighter, healthier future. Go to soberlife.com and check out our new store. Our celebrity guest today is Jason LaChance. He's the host and producer of the Knockin Doorz Down and Don't Hide the Scars podcast, public speaker, and an advocate for recovery. Thank you for joining us on the Sober Podcast today, Jason. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Oh, thank you, Jamie. It's great to speak with you.
Great. Well, listen, it's National Recovery Month, and we often have topic-focused interviews, but there's so much to talk about with you. I want to talk about mentors and mentees in sobriety. But before we get to that, I'd like to acknowledge and discuss the work you do with PAIN, Parents and Addicts in Need. What does the organization do?
Oh boy, great question. What don't we attempt to do? One of our primary, obviously, fentanyl flooding the streets. You're in New York. I'm close to San Francisco, San Jose.
Yeah.
PAIN is located in Fresno, California. I mean, it's everywhere. It's heartbreaking. So Narcan trainings is one of our big initiatives. I mean, everything from larger organizations to individuals that have come in and just said, hey, I'm concerned. I got teenage kids. Can I do a training and be provided Narcan? And we do generally free of charge. And, that's one of our primary points, and really trying to educate.
That's so important right now.
Oh, God, Jamie, it used to be when I was in high school, it was, hey, if you're out, your harm reduction methods were have a designated driver and make sure you have condoms. And now Narcan has to be included in that. It just does.
Have you had experience with Narcan training and distributing?
Yeah. I've gone into several different locations and one-on-one with individuals, even at recovery group meetings. I've had people ask to come and train them and provide Narcan, which I'm honored to. And I think it's just so valuable. I tend to hit a lot of open meetings, so I primarily identify as an alcoholic, but there's some people that come in that are still struggling, and so anything I can do to give them that chance to hopefully find their sobriety, I feel blessed.
Narcan just recently became available over the counter in several stores nationwide. What's your take on this?
I think it's great. I think people are starting to know what Narcan is. My concern is probably the price point. I don't know about if you look there at California, we did some calling around and we got everything from $80 to $125, and generally it comes in 2 doses. And
wow, that's high.
If we can't do something about that price point, and it's unfortunate because it will deter people, and there's not many organizations where I'm at that provide it. Sadly, I live in a smaller community north of Fresno, California, and as far as I know, I'm the only person that provides it, free of charge. We appreciate any donations that are ever made. Of course, being a nonprofit, it is what we survive on. But there's not many folks that it's available, and with the way the economy's shifted, I mean, goodness, it's hard to tell people, yes, this is something you need, an expenditure that you need in your home. So my concern is primarily the cost, but I think it's great it's becoming available.
Yeah. I mean, I think, in my opinion, it should be free, but I know that's it might be a long road getting there. Hopefully it's not a long road. In getting sober, you had, and as many people do getting sober, but it seems like in your story, you had a lot of mentors that guided you along the way. And why don't you tell us a little bit about some of those mentors and that experience?
Sure. My first that really got me to ever attend a meeting was a gentleman that I became friends with. He's actually a church pastor here in our local community, and he took me to my first meeting. Unfortunately, I had a couple of relapses in there and went out for about a year and a half. year and a half, 2 years. And then when I got, started working my recovery, I was, white knuckling it, dry drunk for quite a long time. And after my last relapse, I had several blessed by a few individuals, a gentleman named Tony Hoffman, who travels around the country, speaking at a lot of high schools. And I mean, his story of recovery is amazing. And I just feel so blessed there. My sponsor, met through my previous industry of rock radio, and just been a beautiful blessing. And then as of late, two gentlemen that have had really amazing long-term recovery, Mike Diamond and Adam Jablin, and they do a lot around the country. Mike and an interventionist, and it's amazing when we reach out. And I don't know about you with your recovery, Jamie. I was afraid to ask people, and now
Right.
it's just it's amazing that you can just ask people for help. And I'm still constantly blessed by people, just some advice or whatever it is. So it's nice to kind of have still the mentor, because it's necessary, and yet be able to have some mentees too.
One of my biggest drinking buddies was my boss, and then he got sober while I still worked for him, and then I went on to another job and drank some more. And when I finally had enough, I called him, and he was the first person I called, and because he was the only person I really knew. I saw what sobriety was doing for him. And, so it was a power of example, and he, came to my house and then took me to my first meeting. And like you, it didn't stick at the time. I had some more research to do. But that those relationships are so important. And there was one I that you mentioned in your bio that you sent us about running into someone in a grocery store. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. People often ask, where does the title of your podcast, Knockin Doorz Down, come from? And it's a friend of mine, Carlos Vieira. He wrote his autobiography about his struggles with his cocaine addiction. And I mean, buying by the pounds at the end, yeah. So I think 16, 17 years sobriety from his cocaine addiction. And he had we bumped into each other at the grocery store, which wasn't a common thing for him. He works in the ag industry, incredibly busy man. And I mean, those 60, 70-hour weeks are common.
Right.
And his poor wife had a back injury. So he was there, picking up the slack and taking on some different household chores. And we bumped into each other, and he just went, "Hey, you're always asking me to sponsor these podcast things you're doing. I'm going to call you soon." I think he was like, "I'll call you in a month." And it ended up being about 3 hours later. And he revealed, "Hey, I want to put this book out. 100% of the proceeds are going to benefit my nonprofit. Would you want to do something supplemental? You're being very open about your sobriety in a way that I don't know that I was ahead of the trend, Jamie, but where I live, nobody was talking that way." So he just, he presented the opportunity to step into doing this podcast and just really, destigmatizing, addiction recovery and our mental health struggles and traumas, and really trying to open up the conversations that I find so valuable to me, because that's where I learn,
Absolutely is. And the key is, when you said open up conversations, absolutely. And open conversations, is the key to getting sober, to understanding addiction, and to maintaining sobriety in a life of recovery. Right.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. The most valuable thing I learned to do, especially early on, was as someone that talks for a living, was close my mouth and open my ears.
That's a great place for us to take a quick break. Everyone stay with us. We'll be back in just a few seconds.
Hi everyone, Nate Kelly here, producer of the Sober Podcast. Head over to soberpodcast.com for more information on the show and for a library of all of our past episodes with your favorite sober celebrities. All of our episodes are available in both video and audio format, and you can also register as a guest and apply to be featured on the podcast. thank you so much for downloading today's episode and for continuing to support both the Sober Podcast and our Sober Network. Jamie, back to you.
And we are back talking to Jason LaChance, and he is many things, but he's the host of the podcast Knockin Doorz Down. Jason, as an advocate for recovery, what do you think has been one of your biggest impacts?
Oh, goodness. That's such a deep question. I don't know if it's the people that reach out. I know you as a fellow podcaster, sometimes in this space, we don't always get responses all the time. But I think when someone says that something that was shared, a guest that was on, made a difference in their life, and their sobriety, or maybe it's they have a loved one that struggled with addiction and it's opened their eyes to understanding, that this isn't a moral failure, that a lot of us, struggle with traumas and other challenges. That's really just, it gives that sense of purpose, and it makes you feel good. And as a 12-step guy, that believes in a higher power, it makes me feel like my life matters, to of course to myself and to others, that okay, I'm walking a good line here, whereas before I was a take individual, that it's there's some gift giving that I don't totally understand, and that's a beautiful thing.
That segues beautifully into my next question, which is, what is your favorite part about helping others in recovery? Some of which you answered, but
I think much like where you were talking about your former boss, you started to see how it was working in his life, and you realized, oh, I want what they have.
Yeah.
I think being able to present that in different ways, either be it when I go and be at a speaker meeting or speak at a high school classroom, or someone just reaches out to be able to present to someone, hey, you've got some really beautiful things inside you that you have yet to understand. And I guarantee you, like I ask people, give me 30 days, give me 60 days. Trust me, if your life doesn't change, then you can go back to doing what you were doing before. But if you really work this, I guarantee you your life's going to change in a way that you're going to be more passionate about that. And you're going to want that far more than whatever substance it was that you were using.
Yeah, well said. Can you tell us, you told us a few stories about the mentors that helped you along the way. Can you tell us about some of the mentees, some of the specific stories of people you've helped along the way?
Goodness. I think one of my favorite ones, there was a young man in Australia that Xanax was his drug of choice, and he was about to have a relapse, and he had I forget whatever the count of pills. I think his intent was not to wake up. And he was in the bathroom, stumbled upon the podcast. It's actually an episode with Edward Furlong, who was in Terminator 2 as a kid, a bunch of other movies. And he said he spent the next 6 hours watching the podcast and just hearing story after story that resonated with him. And to me, that one still sticks with me. We still check in with each other, I'd say.
He binged your podcast to get sober. I love it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, at least prevent that relapse, right? And and then he started to get more help. We developed a dialogue. We check in probably about every 2 weeks, and started doing recovery group and focusing actually on therapy and really digging into the reasons underneath why he ever turned to the substance in the first place. And that's really powerful. I mean, you can't put a price tag on that.
No, you can't. And tell us a little bit more about Knockin Doorz Down, the podcast, and what the mission and the format of the show is.
Sure. I as someone that struggled with some mental health issues, anxiety and depression, suicidal ideation, I try to just really have conversations with folks that that show that, hey, you're not alone in your struggles, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your addictions, the outcomes. Oftentimes, we all have our war stories, right, Jamie? I mean,
Yes, we do. And they can be very entertaining
yeah,
and harrowing.
exactly. And I think it's showing that latter part of what you mentioned is
Hmm.
that we can strive to overcome these things, push through, and really kind of turn them into our superpower, so to speak. I mean, when it's someone like yourself that's got long-term recovery, you've developed some things that I'm looking forward to having longer conversation with you. That it's like, oh, feed me this knowledge and information, and I think that's a beautiful process, and I try to bring some humor to it too, and make it a
Hmm.
little more easily digestible. And humor is just important to my life in
Oh,
general.
I couldn't live without it. I mean, it's just the way I always see the absurd in any situation, and I sometimes I have to pull back on the joke cracking.
Yeah, likewise.
I once got called down at the office for being too flip in meetings.
Somehow that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Uh, but I mean, I've been really honored to have everything from some of the biggest name celebrities. I mean, Charlie Sheen and Kat Von D, Kelly Osbourne, to folks that are just, looking to be change makers in their own communities, homes,
Hmm.
and lives on the podcast. So I think it's a nice mishmash of those conversations for people, and I always try to wrap up with some random questions and getting to know folks and asking them for inspirational thoughts to close it out. But one of my primary things I've started doing is I always start with asking them about gratitude, because I think if you live in gratitude and know how to get back to gratitude, things seem to kind of be able to be processed a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of, how do you live in gratitude?
Oh boy, for me, it's daily reading first thing in the morning.
Hmm.
My faith's a little more aligned with Christianity. I have a friend that sends out a daily reading. That's the first thing that goes on, and then from there, my prayer slash meditation, and it just
First
it
thing I do
plays.
is read the daily reflection.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, and it's the first thing I do when I wake up. I turn on my phone and I read that, and a lot of times it doesn't stick with me, but it
Mm,
reminds me I'm an alcoholic. Even
yes.
if I don't go to a meeting, and it's like first thing I remember that. But anyway, go on with
No,
your gratitude practice. Yeah.
I get the same results. And I do daily reflections, not every day, but I
Hmm.
do it often. And I'm with you. I go through, if I have one of those little brain hiccups that I can now easily revert to back. Yeah, you can't do that. Remember, you're an alcoholic. You'll disappear for a week, and
Right.
some results will be exactly what you don't want from the life that you're working to build, and the gifts that you're blessed to have every day. So,
Yeah.
and, some journaling in there
Hmm.
is I think is important, and I try to get the physical activity in. As a guy that was an athlete in high school, early in college, it's amazing to me that my physical routine is not where I would like it. But all those important things that'll get the natural, dopamines, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins going.
Fabulous. Well, one last question, which we ask almost all of our guests, and that is, what is the best lesson you've learned in sobriety, and how did it help you?
It's I don't know if I got it from someone, but I've used it well more than 3 times now, so it's mine, is, no outside solutions to inside problems.
Mm.
I sought
Hmm.
for escapism, validation, all these other things, and other people, chemicals, and everything else, without realizing that, there's a whole individual looking back at me in the mirror. I even though I'm a romantic, I do believe that I am my soulmate. I don't look for anything else and anyone else to complete me.
Hmm.
Um, that doesn't mean that I don't seek out community. Of course, it's
Sure,
imperative.
sure.
But I try not to. I I think with that mantra of no outside solutions to inside problems, it keeps me out of the victimhood that was a good excuse to stay in my addiction. Yeah, I just try to
Excellent
live by that.
lesson,
Yeah.
and a great way for us to close. Thank you, Jason, for being on the show. And to all our listeners, thank you for your continued support. Visit us on soberpodcast.com and all places where you find major podcasts. Leave us a review, sign up for our mailing list. You will also find the contact information in the show notes for our guest, Jason LaChance. I'm your host, Jamie Brickhouse. You can find me every day on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, where I tell a true story in high heels. Signing out for the Sober Podcast. Tune in for another show next week. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.